Hey there, guys. Welcome to our final day of training today. We are going to talk about the right questions to ask someone before you hire them. This is a very important and very delicate, I think, subject, because if you ask the wrong questions, you can actually be hit with a lawsuit for a discrimination. But if you fail to ask the right questions, you might end up hiring the wrong person or hiring someone who could even be toxic to your business. So without further ado, let's dive in and talk about this. If you are live, go ahead and tell me you're live, where you're calling in from, and what position you're trying to hire so I can tailor my examples to fit you and your business. All right. Now, all of this is coming from the workbook that I dropped. If you don't have the workbook to go with this training, go ahead and type workbook in the chat below, and I will make sure that you get sent a copy of that by my team. But there's really essentially, let's say, 4 different topics that you want to discuss with a candidate when you're thinking about hiring them to make sure that they're a good fit for your business. And those are, 1, how they feel about their past positions. 2, how does the candidate appear to handle pressure, which we talked about yesterday, ways we can cause pressure in the hiring process so we can see how they react to that. 3, how the candidate feels about different types of management. And then lastly, how this person works as part of a team. So those are basically the things we are trying to accomplish with the job interview. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look for the answers and the attitudes that demonstrate a sincere interest in contributing to your business, rather than simply what the applicant hopes to get out of the business. Because remember, we're trying to hire for a good culture fit, right? Which means we want someone who's there for the same reasons as you are. In other words, we want to find somebody who is fueled by the same fuel that fuels you. So what fuels you? What lights you up? What makes you want to come to work? What makes you actually excited to work with your clients or your customers or your patients? Whatever that thing is that fuels you, we want to go find the type of personality who is also fueled by that same fuel. Because that way, when you have a staff meeting and you are trying to pump up your team and get buy-in for your ideas, when you're trying to sell them on something that you want them to do, you're going to find it easy to do so if they're there for the right reasons. There's no really such thing as a wrong reason, except just being so purely money motivated that they don't care about anything else. When they don't care about anything else, they're not exactly going to treat your patients or your clients the way you would treat them, right? So that's the first thing we want to look for, are the attitudes of, this person actually being fueled by something besides money, okay? So you want to be alert to the comments and questions that indicate this person's willingness to learn, willingness to contribute to your business, their flexibility, their willingness to take on new duties and help out when needed, all right? So first and foremost, before you sit down with the applicant, I would review thoroughly their resume and their cover letter. That way you're not asking them questions that are already answered in their resume or already answered in their cover letter, because that's just rude and disrespectful, right? We don't want to get off on the wrong foot with this person. Next, prepare the questions that you plan to ask and have them on a document in front of you so you can stay organized and progress through this meeting quickly. And lastly, you'll want to verify with a lawyer that none of the questions you plan to ask are illegal and discriminatory. I did put some basic framework of what types of questions to avoid here inside the workbook, but please know I am not a lawyer. I am not an attorney. I cannot give you legal advice, and I wouldn't want to. So please go ahead and actually refer to an actual lawyer for those types of questions. So when the person comes into the room, you're going to want to greet them very friendly, introduce yourself along with your title, and if appropriate, how you would like to be addressed, okay? Next, you want to explain the purpose of the interview and how it's going to proceed. Give them some rules and some boundaries around what we're going to be doing here, and just kind of a framework so that they understand the process. The better the applicant understands the process, the more calm and collected they're going to feel, because they feel like they know what's going on, right? So next, you're going to indicate that you'll be taking notes and let the applicant know that just because you're noting something down doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing, okay? Tell them you'll be noting down good things and bad things, if any, about the process so that they do not feel like you writing is a sign that they've made a negative impression, okay? And then lastly, ask the person, as I said, if need be, how they would prefer to be addressed. Once you've done so and you've kind of gotten the greeting out of the way, you want to start asking questions and begin the data gathering process about this person. So be positive and really provide the applicant with an opportunity to start informing you about the personal characteristics and their interests and their skill sets and why they would be a good fit for this position. So a great example might be, what are some of your most significant accomplishments to date? And then get them talking. One key thing I will say about this hiring process is you want the applicant or the candidate to be doing most of the talking. If you're doing most of the talking, you're doing something wrong, okay? So we want to ask questions that get the person to talk and move around so you can watch their body language, watch what their eyes are doing, listen to their tone of voice, and try to spot their emotional level, okay? Understanding where they're at emotionally will tell you a lot about this candidate. Are they nervous? Are they kind of being like weird and passive aggressive with you? Or do they seem like they're very cheerful and calm and collected and professional, right? Obviously, a lot of people get nervous going into a job interview, so it's not necessarily a bad thing if they're a little bit nervous, right? I wouldn't take that as an instant red flag. But if they seem like they're like sweating heavily or something, that could possibly be a red flag because it means that they aren't comfortable and relaxed when dealing with strangers, which in some positions for your company, that could be a bad sign, right? Next, make sure you're asking open-ended questions. The key is to get them to talk, right? So we don't want to ask yes or no questions. We don't want to ask questions that have an obvious correct answer. Instead, we want to get them to describe things. For example, how would you describe the circumstances when you would or would not agree to work overtime? So if I were to ask the person, do you mind working overtime? First of all, that's a yes or no question. And second of all, it makes it pretty obvious that I want a certain answer, right? Whereas if I tell the person, please describe the circumstances where you would or would not agree to work overtime, now I'm making them talk and actually pull out an answer. I'm forcing the candidate to describe times when they would and would not, right? So I'm going to get to see where they draw that line in the sand, and I'm probably going to get a lot more honest answer, to be completely honest. So that's an example of using an open-ended question to get the candidate to actually start talking and sharing their opinion. Based on their responses, you also might want to ask secondary questions to better understand their motivation and their reasoning behind their answer. So secondary questions would be things like, could you please explain what you mean by that? Could you tell me more about whatever they just said? How do you feel about that? Those types of questions are secondary questions and are meant to get the candidate to continue talking, okay? I did include inside the workbook some examples of really good interview questions that you can ask. I wanted to just share a few of those. One of my favorite ones is, what did you like best about your previous position? And then what did you like the least about your previous position? Remember, we don't want to stay only on the positive because we do want to get, first of all, their honest opinion of their previous position, but we also want to have opportunities for the person to trip up and show red flags. Remember, we're not here to necessarily make the job interview easy. What we're trying to do is put a little pressure there and open their actual personality so we can see how they really feel and what they really think is going on, right? So if this is the type of person who likes to gossip a whole lot and say negative things about other people and they're very kind of carpingly critical of others, we want to give them lots of opportunities to do so in front of us so that we'll see that, right? And we'll note it as a red flag. So asking them positives, but also asking them for negatives. Another one that I like to ask is, what skills are required for getting along with and working cooperatively with others? This gets us to see how they feel others should be treated. And making them, again, give us examples of times when they did that or failed to do that. Again, failing things is just as important to ask for as when they did something well. Another great question, describe the qualities of a good boss, right? Getting them to tell you what they think about management or what they think would be good management, right? Can tell us a lot about the person. So asking them questions that make them describe things, asking for specific examples, etc. This is what we want to be doing in the hiring process. And again, the whole purpose is so that you can observe their body language and their tone of voice and really get to see their emotional state. EQ is probably the most important skill you can have as someone who does hiring for a company. So there you go. I don't see anybody coming on live. I know we were a couple of minutes late getting started today, so I do apologize for that. But hopefully as you're catching this replay, you will find this useful. If you do want the challenge workbook, which has a whole bunch of different examples of proper questions to ask and also examples of discriminatory questions to avoid asking, then go ahead and type in the word challenge and we'll make sure we get you a copy of that. Otherwise, feel free to drop your questions below, and thank you so much for coming on live with me today. I'll talk to you guys soon.